one thing you should know about espionage as well as bomb making: the first mistake is your last mistake. You're not going to live to make another mistake, and therefore you have to be absolutely careful. One wrong word, and you are a head shorter and 6 feet under. Of course, I didn't wake up one day and said to myself, I'm going to be a spy. Just as I didn't wake up one day 4 years earlier and told myself I'm going to become a terrorist. You just slip into these things, I think, unconsciously. It all started when I was 16. I was, of course, at the time residing in my home country, Saudi Arabia. I was more or less a religious student, but of the rebellious nature, if you see what I mean. So I decided, and I have no idea what took over me, to go and fight in Bosnia. That was in the year 1994. I was only 16. The idea of going and fighting the war in a foreign country that was seen as defensive, in the defense of, defenseless civilians, I would say, that was in itself honorable. I think I wanted to be part of history, part of making it and shaping it, rather than being a spectator.
How were you then recruited by Al-Qaeda?
By the end of the conflict in Bosnia, one of Osama Bin Laden's senior associates, the well-known mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he actually visited Bosnia. He was looking for talent among the veterans of the jihad in Bosnia to recruit into the ranks of Al-Qaeda and to bring them into Afghanistan. For example, he recruited many of the future leaders of Al-Qaeda, Ramzi bin Shib, two of the 9/11 hijackers. He told me that for the next war, for the next jihad, you need to be better trained militarily. The training camps in Afghanistan were reopening again, and it's better that you go there for training, and so I did.
And is it here that you meet Osama Bin Laden?
Yes, my first meeting of Osama Bin Laden is not exactly, the first impression that people will have when you mention the name Osama Bin Laden. The first time I met him was just when he arrived to Afghanistan from Sudan in summer of 1996. He, along with the rest of Al-Qaeda, they were escaping from Sudan with their lives, and they looked like refugees. They looked disheveled, and he was wearing creased robes, and his headscarf was in a bad state. And so the first impression wasn't great in terms of the appearance, but the way he spoke, I think, was quite powerful. He was soft-spoken. That is something that everyone who met him will agree on. That he wasn't someone who gave the impression of being power hungry, power crazy, or someone who would go on to commit atrocities. You would think basically that he is, a quiet, shrewd businessman who, certainly have goals and ambitions, and he wants to fulfill. That's how he would come across to you, and also he would come across as sincere. Not someone who's trying to sell you something by deception or by trying to employ underhanded tactics. No, you really feel that he believes in that product that he is selling you. He was very clear about his aims and his goals and what he wanted to do, what he wanted to achieve. Even though it sounded like the dreams of a lunatic, nonetheless, this lunatic would, in 5 years' time, change the course of history. One thing I remember about Osama bin Laden is that he was able to read people. He would look at me and he would think that, you are not a commander's type. Young, bespectacled, nerdish, bookish boy from Saudi Arabia. You're not going to make it into the, elite urban warfare unit of Al-Qaeda. However, he thought of a better use for me, and he sent me to Al-Qaeda's WMD, Research and Development Unit. And every day we wake up, from dawn all the way until mid-afternoon, that is where we are learning, and sometime either experimenting in blowing up new kind of explosives we are trying to perfect, or unfortunately testing, the latest batch of poisons or chemical weapons on poor rabbits.
At this point, do you consider yourself a terrorist?
When we started talking in details about the usage of the weapons we were constructing there, these are bombs or chemical, gas devices to be left on trains, inside cinemas, nightclubs. These are civilian targets, and this is why we have the indoctrination lessons, the religious, ideological indoctrination, in order to tell us that there are no civilians as far as our enemies are concerned. There are no civilians. So we have to redefine what a civilian is, to the point where we come to the conclusion that if you pay taxes in the West, and if you go and vote at the voting booths, then you are electing your government, which basically sanction the bombings against Muslim countries and populations, sanctioning the siege against Iraq and the killing of many hundreds of thousands of young children, or so the propaganda was at that time. So that is why we ended up coming to the conclusion, which is a twisted conclusion, I would say, that there are no civilians as far as the West is concerned.
What was the trigger for helping you realize that this has gone too far?
I think the first time I realized that I was in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time in history was in early August of 1998. I woke up to the news that the American embassies in Nairobi, in Kenya, and in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania were razed to the ground by vehicle bombs designed and driven by Al-Qaeda members, our fellow Al-Qaeda members. It was the first ever atrocity committed by Al-Qaeda. It was the first. It was the opening salvo of this war that they were telling us we were preparing for against the Americans. Details were coming that, in fact, it was an embassy that 220 plus innocent people from Kenya, from Uganda, and from Somalia were killed at that attack because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. 150 were blinded for life. The total number of people who were wounded exceeded 5,000. The reason is because the device was so big, but also they embedded thousands of shrapnels within the device to maximize, the number of casualties, which wasn't excusable because the target is the embassy. You want to destroy it. Why you want to harm every single one who is in the vicinity? What we are doing here is no longer the acts of revolutionaries or insurgents. It's more or less pure terrorism. When I went to the de facto mufti of Al-Qaeda at that time and asked him the question whether, how can we justify this? I said to him, I remember that, look, I'm not doubting anything, but I want to be at peace in my heart that we did the right thing, because it's just 220 people dying in order to get at 12 Americans, and these 220 had nothing to do with what America is doing in Saudi Arabia. So his answer was quite chilling. I mean, he said, look, we have all this justification that if the enemy is hiding among civilians, then we have the right to go and kill them, even if it means the killing of these civilians, and then God will sort them out. I mean, he went as far as, saying that, after all, they are a bunch of Africans who care. I made the conscious decision to leave, and I just waited for the right moment to go. I mean, I already had the perfect excuse. I had a medical condition that I needed to go and leave Afghanistan in order to get it treated. I left in December of 1998, just 3.5 months after the atrocity. And through some some incredible circumstances, I ended up in the lap of the British intelligence.
Can you tell us how you were turned by the British?
It so happened that I went to Qatar in order to just regroup and to think where to go from there and to decide what next to do with my life. That I now left Al-Qaeda. I remember on the aircraft from Peshawar to Doha in Qatar, I was even recanting and renouncing my oath of allegiance to Al-Qaeda. I just wanted to be out, and I didn't want to continue with them. When I went to Qatar, I ended up actually being detained there. However, those who detained me in Qatar, the authorities there were extremely kind, and they were more or less understanding of my circumstances, especially after I explained that actually I was leaving. They told me that while they admire my idea that I wanted to go to university, basic study history and become a teacher in the future, that while it is noble and nice and wonderful that you want to turn your life around, there is a catch here, which is that Qatar is a very small country. So the reality is that you will end up, I will end up meeting my former associates on daily basis, in mosques or shopping centers. And therefore, the objective of hiding away from them, is more or less gone out of the window altogether. And so they suggested that I should be more or less protected and utilized by a much bigger agency in a bigger country that will understand, the value of what I would be able to do, and then take it from there. And so that is why I more or less found myself accepting. On the same day, I had to say either yes or no. I said yes. On the same day, I was on a British Airways flight to London.
What was your mission?
I think the question should be, what wasn't my mission? There were so many tasks. You see, when you are a spy, within an organization like Al-Qaeda, in a place like Afghanistan, which was a black hole. By the way, Afghanistan was literally the black hole of telecommunications in the entire globe at that time. It was even more disconnected than North Korea. There were no landlines, and there were no mobile phones. The only way you can transmit information to the outside world is by going out. And therefore, your task is to absorb everything around you. So, you are learning about the camps, locations, the number of people attending, the names, aliases, the breakdown in terms of demographics, ethnicities of people coming in, nationalities of people coming in, their ages, where they come from, what are their aims. And then when you come out, you spend literally, hundreds of hours putting it back together from your mind, from your memory, and reconstructing it again for the benefit of the intelligence services.
Were you nervous?
Okay. I get asked this question so many times. Were I nervous? One thing you should know about espionage, as well as bomb making, the first mistake is your last mistake. You're not going to live to make another mistake. And therefore, you have to be absolutely careful. One wrong word, and you are a head shorter and 6 feet under. If you are nervous, it will show. It will show. When you go there, before you reach there, you really convince yourself that you are back to that old persona, that you are a genuine, West-hating, bloodthirsty jihadist, and you have no qualms whatsoever about killing all of those who stand in our way. You bury your nervousness so deep in order to make sure that it doesn't show on my face. I remember in 1999, in one of the camps, I was in the kitchen, there were other people, but then I realized that the people around me were leaving towards the door behind my back. I didn't know why, but then before I wanted to turn around and look around and see why, I distinctly felt the end of a pistol against my spine. I distinctly heard the voice of one of our fellow jihadists in the camp menacingly uttering these words, "Now it's over, give it up, we know who you are, you know who you're working for, it's over, now you have to come with me quietly." If he said the British or mentioned specific organization, I would be really nervous, possibly even, I don't know, maybe faint, because I know what fate will befall me. But because the accusations were so random, I realized that this is actually one of the tactics they taught us about, which is to have random checks. So I turned around, told him in no uncertain terms, lower your weapon. It is forbidden, explicitly forbidden, to point a gun at a fellow jihadist. And I won't tolerate this joke. So the ferocity, with which I confronted him with, more or less took him aback, lowered his weapon, and asked, for forgiveness, that it was, his duty, and my name was on the list. After he left, the kitchen, even though it was November in Afghanistan, it was started to snow, I was sweating, buckets.
Can you tell us about anything that your intelligence that you gathered stopped?
One of the things about spying against a big organization like Al-Qaeda and being involved with multiple cells is that your information, lead either directly or indirectly to the prevention of terrorism. But in some cases, the plot is so advanced that you end up being part of it. Why? Because I was an explosive expert. Being an explosive expert within Al-Qaeda means that other cells will come and seek your help and expertise. So this happened already in a plot in order to attack the subway system in New York in 2003. So I was more or less part of that plot. I was asked for help and I provided the help, but in exchange for that help, I was able to more or less understand the outline of the plot, the participants, and the direction where the plot was taking place. It was disrupted in the end. Also, there was a plot in 2005, not far away from where we are recording this in Canary Wharf here, as well as the city and Mayfair, to poison the car handles of luxury car brands. And the idea is that if you want to attack the elite of the bankers and the hedge fund managers, that would have been the right thing to do. This cell sought my help in 2005, and they were already obtaining the materials to put the poisons together. That was disrupted. The leader of the cell escaped Britain before he was caught, and in later years he became one of the senior bomb makers for ISIS in Iraq and Syria, just to show how serious that plot was.
Obviously, eventually you discovered you were a spy. Are Al-Qaeda angry with you?
Given the fact that I caused the death of at least one or two of their senior leaders in Saudi Arabia, and I have no regret about that, they resisted arrest. I would say yes, they are angry, enough to try to kill me twice, once in 2009 and one in 2016. It's a badge of honor as far as I'm concerned. All I did, everything in my life, even when I went to Bosnia, was to protect. It wasn't my intention to go out to the world and harm people. I jumped ship as soon as the first atrocity took place. Like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or any other terror organization, are the true enemies. Betraying them is an act of honor, not an act of dishonor.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I start screaming off the top of my lungs. I started to feel like something like just burning and eating at my skin, and just, I was hot, I was sweaty, it stunk.